Keep pushing that boulder to the top of the hill. Welcome one and all to Suckville.
Extraordinary stories from ordinary humans? Yes, please. This is live from Suckville, and I'm your host, Sylva Florence, a writer, editor, and bike tour leader currently laid up in Suckville with a broken hip. All right, hello everybody in Suckville. Today I'm with Julie Shanks, and she is an avid cold dipper and advocate of the Wim Hof Method. She is originally from Nova Scotia, Canada, but spends her time living between Italy and there. She is currently a student of sex and relationships at the Somatica Institute in San Francisco. Well, welcome, Julie. How are you today?
Very, very honored to be here with you.
I'm honored to have you on.
I think people do need some positive vibes. I'm glad you're hosting this.
Well, thank you. I know that the world these days is full of a lot of crazy shit, and so are our lives, but I think also giving people a place to talk about their experiences is a valuable endeavor. So speaking of people's experiences, we'll get into what cold dipping and Wim Hof and all of that is in a second. But first, let's give our listeners a little bit of an idea of what was going on in your life when you discovered cold dipping.
I describe myself as bottom of the barrel. I had never really experienced full-blown depression before in my life, but I would say that I was living in a very dark time. I was going through a lot of changes in my life. I had been in a really important relationship, and I was deeply in love with somebody, and that didn't work out. It got messy, so that was really hard. And then I moved from a country that I had been living in Italy, for 15 years, and I left everything that I knew, my friends, my career. Those already are really dramatic changes in one's life, and then also on top of that, going through a really difficult separation. It was too much. I was overwhelmed.
How are you coping with all of this stress, or were you coping with it?
So my coping mechanisms were very unhealthy. Like, I was smoking marijuana from a young age, up to 5 joints a day, just to relax. I smoked cigarettes all my life, a lot of drinking. So very unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I sought out unhealthy relationships and drama to maintain this steady cocktail of cortisol in my brain.
Okay, Julie, so I want to ask about what cortisol is, just in case somebody out there isn't sure. But I think it'll all probably tie in together with the next question, which is, how long have these coping mechanisms of yours been in place?
Well, I was diagnosed with C-PTSD. I don't know if you know what that is.
Why don't you explain it to people who don't know?
It's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So we hear a lot about PTSD, which is people who survive war or really traumatic event in their life, but it's a one-time traumatic event. Whereas complex post-traumatic stress disorder is associated with childhood trauma, so an extended period of chronic stress, particularly in the developmental stages of the brain. I was basically addicted to my own cortisol, which is a hormone that's released in the brain. It's also associated with like fight or flight. I grew up in a very unpredictable environment with a mentally ill mother and a violent alcoholic stepfather. So growing up, I was very vigilant, very aware of my surroundings because of the unpredictability of it all.
When did you realize that this was a kind of a pattern that you were trapped in with the cortisol and the seeking drama and things like that?
Through this moment, I was 44 years old, so I had been going through life unaware of this pattern until then, and I was like, what is going on? The people change and the situations change, but I am the constant here, and so I understood that it was me. It was how I was reacting to life. I was putting myself in these situations. So I took responsibility for, like, I understood my part in the big picture.
So I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are listening and thinking like, this makes sense.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people out there have C-PTSD and they don't realize it because it's fairly new as a disorder, I guess you could call it, and not a lot is known about it because it manifests in very different ways for people. I
Okay.
normally considered myself a happy-go-lucky person, probably because I was high a lot of the time and not really looking inward and dealing with the actual pain that was going on under the surface until something triggered me. So I would have violent triggers of like very physically painful in my body, panic, anxiety, nervousness, very violent reactions, not physically violent to any people. I was in a state of obsessively thinking about the conversations that I had had with my ex-partner in particular, going over and over and over in my mind, and I couldn't stop these obsessive thoughts from happening. I couldn't go to sleep. I would wake up crying. And I hid it from most people because I was ashamed of being depressed and not being able to handle it.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of stigma in being somebody who's depressed.
Yeah.
Like there's something wrong with you.
Or you're not strong. You're not able to handle life.
It's a very good
You're
point.
weak. You're not able to handle stress. I was not able to handle the amount of stress that was going on at the time. Like it all seemed to be crashing down at the same time. I couldn't see a way out. It was a blessing. Now I see it was a tremendous blessing.
I have a teacher in a class that I'm taking, and this just came to mind when she started the class, was that every crisis is a huge opportunity.
At the time, I didn't see it, but looking back, yeah, it's true. A lesson, a huge life lesson. So grateful for all of it.
Yeah, gratitude is an immense, like almost power or a tool. For sure, it's a tool.
Absolutely. Agree.
So,
Yeah, so basically I was in this situation, like this bottom of the barrel situation, because our brains are programmed, our emotional programming happens when we're so young, that my inner child was seriously wounded and I was neglecting her. And so I was determined basically to deal with this in a different way than I ever had. So I was seeking, searching different healthy ways to cope, because I had normally taken to things like distraction, going out, working a lot, and not really dealing with them and looking inside and reflecting and trying to change. What I started doing was journaling, and I did the flotation, the sensory deprivation flotation.
what does that do for you? What does a flotation technique do?
It brings you into a state of deep relaxation. It helps to bring your brain into a theta brainwave pattern. So that's like the deepest relaxation. Then I started also reading and listening to podcasts about alternative ways to deal with depression and anxiety. Listening to Gabor Mate, reading books by
And
him.
who is this? Who is this person?
He is a fundamental figure in the Canadian medical world, I'll say. He's dedicated his life to medicine. He's a doctor out on the West Coast in Vancouver, and he has dealt with addiction, addressing it's like an epidemic in the Western part of the world anyway.
So you're talking about addiction to like drugs and alcohol?
But not only, he talks about the fact that you can
Yeah.
be addicted to anything. It's the addiction mechanism that's the same for
Yeah. Yep.
addiction is addiction. So I was addicted to unhealthy relationships and drama. Yeah, and those the coping mechanisms, of marijuana and alcohol and cigarettes. So he'll help me to understand the science behind it, and he's an advocate of alternative ways of healing, such as ayahuasca and psilocybin.
And what are those for anybody that doesn't know?
Psilocybin is in magic mushrooms. Ayahuasca is a combination of some plants from Peru. It's used in ceremony as a medicine. It has a lot of healing properties, like specifically for parasites, and so they use it to heal people physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. In this time period, in the last 2 years, I have participated in ayahuasca ceremonies, which have been very helpful, as well as psilocybin. So I was microdosing. I did a lot of different things, alternative medicines, in order to heal myself.
And so when you were looking into all these alternative methods of healing, kicking addiction, then you stumbled on this Wim Hof method, right? How did you find it?
It found me. I like to say it was literally the first lockdown we experienced in Canada in March 2020. We were living in the city, my son and I. A friend of mine who lives in the country, he was like, come to my place. I have a big place. You can stay with me during the lockdown. We didn't know how long it was going to be. We were all in the dark about this pandemic, right, at the time. So I was out at his place, and he was an avid listener of Joe Rogan podcasts. So we listened to them while we were working from home, and Wim Hof was on Joe Rogan. And I was touched very deeply by what he had to say. He would be considered, a guru to some people, I suppose. He sees it as his mission to help people with anxiety and depression through what he calls the Wim Hof Method, which is a combination of a few things: cold exposure, breath work, and commitment are the 3 pillars. So I was very interested in what he had to say. I enrolled immediately in one of his online courses, a 10-week course.
And so what did this Wim Hof method include?
So every week was an added on component of the method. So cold exposure. I don't know anybody who likes the cold, and I was certainly in that category of people. Like, I hated the cold. I always have cold hands and feet. Can't wait for winter to be over so that I can enjoy my life again. And I lived in that way.
Since you and I are friends, you've been trying to convince me for a while about this cold thing, and I still think it's torture.
Yeah.
With respect.
So when I moved back from Canada, back to Canada from Italy, my friends went to the beach in September, and I could not even put my feet in because it felt like razor blades slicing through my feet. I was like, you guys are crazy going in that water. So, that was just, September 2019. And now I smash the ice in order to get into a lake.
Do you smash it with your forehead?
I actually got a sledgehammer for Christmas.
Oh my God.
I feel so badass.
All I want for Christmas is a sledgehammer.
Yeah. So anyway, so I started Wim Hof starts the 10-week course. He starts you off slow, so just like 10 seconds. But the 10-second cold shower was just absolutely unbearable. Like, during, I felt horrible, but afterwards I was like, oh my God, I just did 10 minutes. Or
so you end on the cold?
End on the cold. But it felt so empowering, and I felt like a rush of adrenaline. Honestly, Sylva, you cannot imagine.
Oh, it's like the same adrenaline that you've been seeking.
That's the thing. It is a switch of addiction. I have to admit that. Like, from unhealthy, though, to healthy. So now I have a whole bunch of new and different feel-good hormones being released in my brain that are definitely better.
Absolutely. And is this something that you do every day?
I do it every day, just about every day for the last 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. It has stabilized my mood. Immediately, I was feeling myself being pulled out of the depths of depression. I felt like I had hope for the first time. And it kept me coming back. The torture did not deter me because I was just so determined to crack open this unhealthy mess that I was and start cleaning it out and fixing and healing and looking for new, better, healthier ways to help myself. Building up on those 10 seconds, eventually 30 seconds. And then on week 7 of the course, I was doing 10-minute cold showers without any hot.
Maybe you were a polar bear in your former life.
Maybe. And so on my 45th birthday, I did my first ice bath where I filled my bathtub up with ice. And I did like 3 minutes. And I felt so good and badass. And I was like, I can do this. I can do hard things. I found the power, the inner strength that I didn't feel like I had before.
And since you've started to do this Wim Hof method, have you encountered any other really big, huge stresses in life changes?
I mean, not as devastating as a breakup, but definitely life, I lost my job because of the pandemic. It definitely caused some fear within me, but it did not send me into, the obsessive thinking. Instead, I was like, I got this.
That's what I was wondering, if this had changed you in a way that will, help you also going forward. Like, it sounds like it's more of a permanent change.
Oh, absolutely. Another component of the Wim Hof method is a breathing technique, also known as alkaline breathing. So that's about a 10-minute breath work session every morning that I do. And breath work is underrated. People say the cold is not for them. I mean, I try to convince everybody to come with me. It's a hard sell, but breath work is definitely doable for most people.
I understand the importance of breath work because I'm somebody that does yoga and meditates and things like that. But maybe there's people that are listening that are like, what the flip is breath work? Can you give us a little idea about that?
Sure thing. Well, there are many different types of breath work. The breath work that Wim Hof does was inspired by an ancient breathwork technique called Tummo, Tummo. And it's also called alkaline breathing because it changes your pH, your blood's pH level.
And Julie, what's the big deal then about having high levels of acidity in the body?
Acidity in the blood or an acidic body, it promotes a whole slew of problems. So like acne, fatigue, depression, it's been linked to inflammation, all types of disease. Disease begins with an inflammation. So if you can reduce inflammation in the body, breath work can definitely help.
It's pretty fascinating. I had no idea.
And it also helps to, like I said, I was addicted to these new feel-good chemicals like dopamine, oxytocin, cannabinoids, which are in marijuana. So I'm literally high on my own supply.
Now I think you might have been like a scientist polar bear in a past life.
I've just read up on a lot of the science of this because I'm very, very interested. Not just that I feel good.
No, it's very fascinating.
Yeah. So I have started a cold dipping group in my community. We maintain 2 ice holes in frozen lakes in the city. We're called Coldplay. Isn't that funny?
That's ingenious.
So there are like 65 members in our group, which is awesome. And it's growing because more and more people are learning about, the benefits of cold immersion. Yeah, so I said I have a YouTube channel where I upload videos about my journey, about how it's changed my life. I'm addiction free.
And we're going to put all of these in the show notes just in case anybody wants to go check you out.
I'm Minty Mermaid on YouTube.
If anybody is listening somehow in Nova Scotia and they want to find you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
On Instagram, we are Coldplay NS for Nova Scotia. And on Facebook, we are Coldplay, and then in brackets, formerly Ice Coast Central. Always looking for new recruits.
Fresh meat.
Because the more the merrier, really. And everybody has a similar story. I just spoke at an event about this. The event is called Night of Adventure, and this particular evening was dedicated to women in exploration. And it was a sold out event. There were like a few speakers, and I was one of them. You know, we're getting the word out there, and there are more and more people interested in this. And I think that that's absolutely fantastic, because there are other ways of dealing with stress and depression and anxiety. And this is free. This is free.
I think people really need some outlets like that after everything that's been going on, whether or not you want to torture yourself by dipping in cold water every day like the Minty Mermaid or not, to try and think of different ways to heal ourselves and to be open to things that we never maybe even thought we'd ever do, you know?
It's true. I never thought in a million years that I would do this, Sylva. Like, this was not on my periphery at all. People respond to me by saying, oh, I could never do that. I hate the cold. And, you know, I did too. That's the thing. There's nothing that you can compare this to that you would understand unless you did it. Cold is medicine. It really is. For me and for the people who practice with me, we all have similar stories.
Yeah, I was curious about that actually. Like, are there a lot of people that ended up in your group that have also had addiction problems?
Oh, yes. Addiction, chronic depression, anxiety, panic. Yeah, particularly through the pandemic, it triggered a lot of that. Because what the cold does is it brings you into your body, and you're no longer up in your head. It pulls you into the present moment because you are doing your best to, not run the heck out of there, not like scream and cry because of the torture. We focus on our breath, and now I look forward to it. I welcome it. I can't wait for it. When I know I'm going to cold dip, I always get a little bit nervous in a good way and excited because I know that I'm going to visit my teacher.
It's pretty much what I feel like every morning when I'm about to have a cappuccino. I don't know what that says about me.
There you go. Yeah, it's like a warm embrace.
The cold is a warm embrace. Amazing.
I also feel like I'm rewilding. Have you heard that expression?
What does that mean?
It means I'm rediscovering that I am a part of nature. I'm not just like going into nature as a human that isn't part of it. Now I feel like I'm going home.
I completely understand that. As you know, I feel much more at home outside than inside because I'm a bit of a wild animal.
Exactly. We are all wild animals, and we've forgotten that because we live in, moderated climates, with our heating and our blankets and our sweaters, and, we're not in survival mode all the time anymore. We live in comfort, and we forget that we are actually a part of nature. And so going back into nature has helped me to feel like I'm a part of something much bigger and much more complex.
And because we are, everything is connected.
Yeah. It's been conditioned out of us. Like we're civilized, quote unquote.
Why is it that civilized means out of nature?
Yeah, it means assimilating into a society, working 9 to 5, staring at a screen all day, not moving our bodies. And depression and anxiety are through the
Yeah,
roof.
that's true. And what would you say to somebody, who's depressed or anxious or, suffering as you were with addiction or not, that maybe is interested in trying something like this, but they're like me and they're like, fuck that. I don't want to be cold.
Okay. Well, Wim Hof's story is what compelled me so much. I'll say, based on it, like in my own story, my own skin, that it has changed my life in a way that I couldn't have imagined. I was in the depths of despair, and I was done with feeling that way. I was done with feeling helpless, hopeless. I think the most important thing is to believe that there is a way out, and that cold water, if you're at all interested, start doing some research. Listen to Wim Hof. It's a question of mind over matter.
And was there anything maybe for somebody who wants to try it the very first time? Like, could you give them any pointers on maybe how to not be so nervous, or is there anything that you found that helped you to kind of get accustomed to the cold?
There are different Wim Hof Facebook groups, and I just posted on there, I'm about to do my first ice bath and I'm fucking terrified. Please help me. And people reached out to me from those communities. And there was a guy in Arizona that was like, I want to do an ice bath too, and I've never done it. We can do it together. And so we actually had a Zoom call where I was in my bathroom in my bathing suit, and I had just filled up my bathtub with ice. And he did the same in his front yard. He filled up like his recycling bin with ice, and we both did it together across the country. That's the thing. The community is so amazing because it is really hard to start and to continue. It's scary, but once I did it, I was laughing my ass off afterwards. Like, oh my God, that was so much easier. I just built it up so much in my head.
I think a lot of things, we get blocked from a lot of things because we're in our heads.
But Wim Hof's story, can I just briefly talk about his story?
Sure.
So when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, he mentioned about how he discovered the cold. And it was that he was married to the love of his life. He had 4 children with her, and she was schizophrenic, depressed. And she committed suicide by jumping out of their 8th-story balcony window. And he came home.
Wow, that is awful.
Yeah. So he was in a major, he was devastated, losing the love of his life, having 4 small children to deal with, and he was a handyman. He did not have, a steady stream of income by any means. So he had to be there for his kids, and he didn't know what he was going to do. And he was, he's Dutch. He was living in Holland and was walking in the park, contemplating what the fuck he should do. And he saw this hole in the frozen lake, and he jumped into it. He felt compelled to just dive into that hole. And when he came out, he said he had the strength and energy of 10 men. And he kept going back to the hole every day in order to be there for his kids. And it worked.
Sometimes when you're at the moment of utmost desperation, sometimes you get just what you need from something totally unexpected.
And that's what happened to me. His story touched me deeply, like on a soul level, because I was feeling desperate. And when he said it's my mission to help people with pain and anxiety and depression and mental illness, I mean, he was talking to me.
I think he was.
So this is a big part of my life, and yeah, I cherish it, and I want to get the word out. Whoever will listen, I will talk their ear off about it.
You little scientist polar bear mermaid, you. Well, I appreciate you talking our ears off. It's been enlightening.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right, friends, after that very illuminating conversation with Julie, I want to leave you with some lovely advice from our very first mayor, Linnell Fremmer, whose allergies are kicking in, and so she, quote, sounds like an 80-year-old smoker right now. Sorry, Linnell, it was too cute not to share. So I'm going to read out her advice. It's fairly simple, she said. I would just like to encourage everyone not to get so caught up in the destination that they forget to enjoy the journey, even when they're going through a season of serious struggle. Appreciate all the little things in our day-to-day lives that often get overlooked, like a sunrise, or a sunset, or a kind word from a stranger. Always be kind. Compliment strangers. If you're having a bad day, try to make someone else's day better, and it will inevitably also make your day better. I love that advice, and I hope everybody goes out and says something nice to a complete stranger today. Please do send me your stories or comments for a future show at livefromsuckville@gmail.com. Want to be the mayor of Suckville for next week and get to shout someone out or share some advice? Find out more on Live from Suckville's Instagram and Facebook pages. Special thanks to my Irish friend Chris Kirby for the charming theme music. This episode was recorded in my kitchen and produced by yours truly. Until next time.